Welcome back, everybody. This is Night Flight. I'm Judith Krober, and today I have a new guest. It's Marcia Shafer. Her website is beyondzebra.com, and she does unusual consulting for an emerging world. Sorry, my cat is just freaking out. And yeah, we will find out what that is. Unusual consulting. We will also talk about what are these emerging times and this emerging world. And I think we have a lot to talk about, and it will be fun. So Marcia, thank you so much for coming.
I'm delighted to be here. I'm ready to just dive into it with you, whatever direction you want. Perhaps I should introduce myself in a way to your audience so they understand who I am and what I do.
Yeah, please.
I had a very interesting lifetime in that since I was in the crib and very young, I had extraterrestrial contact. But of course, I was born at a time when didn't understand it, didn't know what it meant. I'll offer up my age. I grew up in the 60s. And so the only thing available to us back then were TV shows like The Twilight Zone or something that hit on the paranormal. So I had to put all that away, just not being able to figure out what was going on. And it wasn't until my 30s that I really began to acknowledge to myself and understand what was happening to me. Intriguingly, when I became, in my early 20s, I ran across some psychics, and they used to always tell me, you had extraterrestrial contact. And that really scared me. And I thought, listen, lady, if you were psychic, you'd know you were scaring me. So shut up, but there was a point that really came where I realized I had to just overcome my fears. And just overnight, things switched. But that also had an impact on the extraterrestrial experiences I was having, because when I was younger, it was just things were happening. I didn't understand them. It was like an unwitting participant, so I thought. But when I began to be more engaged in understanding the situation around me and even somewhat demanding, the information that I got changed, the situation changed. It was as if I became a student instead of a test subject. I hate to use that term, but I can't think of anything else. And the best analogy would be somewhat like if anybody has ever heard of Coco, the famous gorilla that they taught sign language to, it would be like, they're trying to get Coco to say cat or banana. And one day you walk in and she signs, where's my breakfast? And all of a sudden you go, oh my God, I can do something with this. And I sort of look at it along those lines of what happened to me, because I didn't just go along with things. I insisted on other information. I wasn't going to go forward. They will often try to get you to be a voice, to apply. They prey to your ego, do this, tell people this. I would be like, hell no. I need some proof, or I need facts. I had a very scientific type of mind. But what happened was I began to get information about the universe, dimensional reality, realities in general that just expanded my whole understanding of life. So I had all those experiences, but along the way, I also had a highly evolved professional background in health, in medicine, in business. And I was able to take all this, the science, the knowledge that I had, the business knowledge that I had, and put it together in a way that I could use understanding of those worlds to talk about these things that didn't have much understanding in a way that people could understand them. So I was able to introduce extraterrestrial reality to a lot of audiences. I did that by writing a book called Confessions of an Intergalactic Anthropologist back in the late 90s, I think it was the first edition. And I came basically out of the closet, but to my surprise, it was read in, I think, close to 30 countries, won an award from the publishing industry. And as a result, it kind of cemented me as a person out there who could speak about this, because I had knowledge of things that weren't usually talked about. So that all integrated together. And then around 2012, it took a different turn, because as I was doing that and also using my psychic abilities that had developed quite a bit, I was focusing on the individual and their ability to grow and understand themselves and the world at large. Around 2012, I began to get a lot of very different information about the future, about civilizations, about mankind as a whole. And by 2016, I had come up with Spirconomics, which was the translation of all this information. The grand purpose was for humanity to look at itself and to recognize that they had an untapped potential. And within that potential came the ability to build an advanced civilization, one that would be appreciated at the time when we came ready to go out into the cosmic corridors and join a greater reality than the one we generally know as our citizens. And so that is where I'm really focused now. And when I talk about unusual consulting for an emerging world, many of us see that we are in the midst of great change, but we don't see where we're going, what's the potential, or do we have the ability to steer this change at this particular time? And so I show how we do have the ability to steer by addressing the collective of all of us. So you can go through the corridor of learning to better yourself, but it's also the time of going down the corridor of learning that you are part of something greater. And that as a collective, if we come together, for those who share the ideology of we can build a better world, then we have the capacity to execute in new ways. And while we look at all the chaos around us, that's okay, because the focus is to start building up the new. You can't really build a strong foundation or infrastructure on a crumbling foundation. It's a waste of time. And so I focus on the people who have professional backgrounds, knowledge, and insight, but also have a spiritual longing and the capacity to execute new vision, new ways of doing things. There's a very practical path that's associated with it. It's not esoteric, metaphysical jargon. This is building in new ways of doing business, economics, social structure of living together, reevaluating the paradigm of governance for humanity, particularly the human of the 21st century, and moving forward. So there's a lot of elements together in it, but in a nutshell, it's basically building on the power of one, the power of me, and moving into the power of we. This is the time of us and understanding who we are and how do we work together, particularly while there is so much divisiveness and cacophony of anger and everything that's going on. Now, the other thing that's kind of interesting that adds another element to this is throughout the years, from the time I was very young, I think the first ones I got were around 14, they have told me things that were going to happen, not just to me, but to the earth and to the planet. And to my surprise, a lot of those things have unfolded. When I was around that very young age of 14, they told me there would be a time on the planet, basically it seems to describe now, a time of great change, people facing each other antagonistically. The earth would undergo great, tremendous changes. There'd be climate differences, and so on. And I remember looking at him going, well, I don't want to stick around for that, because they said there'd be a lot of death. I'm going, I'll go with the big group, I'll leave. I don't want it. And they said, that's what you were born for. You were born for that time. And this goes to show what a perverse sense of humor they have, because I had no idea it would be like 50 years. I thought it would be like 10, I'd be in my 20s. And I'm like, geez, sons of guns, I don't know if I would have stuck through this if I know I was going to take in so long. But here we are at this major crossroads. And, I'm offering up what I know and what I can teach to help those who are willing to step in and really make a difference instead of complaining. If you're going to complain and just have a negative view, we all can do that. I'm not interested in working with you, but if you really want to make a difference and get a new skill set to do it, then those are the people I work with. And I have to mention one other element as we start talking about the animals. I'm strongly involved in rescue and, animal realities and co-living with other species on the planet is a major, major piece of this.
Yeah,
So.
we are hardly capable of living with each other right now. So,
And I think that's part of the reason why people who are deeply into animals and animal consciousness, turn to them because they're innocents. And, not only the innocence, they're vulnerable to the predatory patterns of mankind. And people get so frustrated within their own species that they look at these innocent creatures, most who either you want to exist in the wildlife or offer love and companionship in a domestic situation, and they are so horrified that they are abused, neglected, victimized by humanity. And it starts a very radical turn within oneself to see an innocent victimized. Same thing for children.
Yeah. So when you, over the years, when you had extraterrestrial contact, was there ever a point where you asked yourself, well, are they fooling me? Is there a lot of nonsense coming through and they just wrap it up very nicely and present it in a good way? And
That's brilliant.
and how did you resolve that?
I'm so glad you suggested that we go down this avenue, because that's one of the things when it comes to extraterrestrial reality, I focus on early on is, part of my language, how do you break through the bullshit and know whether it's true or not? Because as I alluded to earlier, I've had contact with many species, not just one. What I found was pattern, and that many of the species used a technique that I believe they got from studying the human race for a long time. Humans are very enmeshed in their own ego. And as a result, if they have any chance to feel special, they'll grab at it because people want to have a life with meaning, and this is an easy pathway to it. So one of the common tricks, if you will, or behavioral manipulations that you have to watch out for is that they will tell you you're special, you're an ambassador, you have a message and you need to get out there. And maybe you'll start to pick up elements about my personality as we talk. Basically I said bullshit, in my own way. I don't think so. I'm not going out there. I don't have a need for a public audience or people to follow me. And I said no. And that was the major turning point for me. And I look at this as almost a hazing that goes on with humanity, where they test you to see, are you focused in your ego and yourself that we can tell you and push you around and have you do anything and say anything? Or have you broken through to higher elements of self-awareness, where we will then take the time to work with you, like Coco, we'll then take the time to work with you and see what we can get, so to speak, because the higher races in particular really look for people who could be good translation mouthpieces and spark the best of humanity. And so I think, pardon my language, I know I'm on camera, I shouldn't say this, but being a bit of an asshole, I was able to turn things around and unwittingly elevated myself into this other situation. The key thing is we know so little about extraterrestrial reality. If you look at what's out there in literature, it's people who say they have experiences who really don't have much insight into a greater picture. An alien was my baby daddy. I mean, that's a facetious way to put it. I know it's a sensitive subject for some, but that type of thing, or they abducted me, it was terrifying. And there's nothing that gives us an encyclopedia or a Wikipedia to the true skinny on alien reality 101 that teaches us what happens, what are the physical things that you experience when they warp dimensions and come through, and how do you stay in control? Are you able to stop it? Do you know how? There's a specific technique that can be done, but it has to be done at a certain instant, I found out. How do they communicate? People think that, it's either BBB, or whatever. And what I learned is that the majority of races out there use what I call holographic communication. And that is a way where you'll get an image instantly in your head, but it's like a brick hitting you. And as it unfolds, it's like all this code or something is in it. And you have a wealth of knowledge that would be 12 volumes in an instant. So they don't necessarily communicate telepathically, though many of them can and will. They will usually, for me, it's that instantaneously I'll get a vision, an image, and with it, it's like a coded image that unfolds and plants itself in my head, and I have all this knowledge instantaneously. So, how do they communicate? Some of the things you just brought up, like how do you know whether to believe what they're telling you or not? And I always say, why should you believe anybody you meet on the street? You use your aspects of intelligence and knowledge and questioning, and you think about it. People have common myths about alien reality. Will they save us? Why should they? Why don't we save ourselves? So, these things pull into how they react. And historically, humanity, I'm sure you're well aware of this, has, they're gods because they know so much more than we do. So here's the kicker of the 21st century and where we're living now is advanced technology has brought us so much understanding that what was once poof with a magic wand is now, an iPhone with, Wi-Fi. So we are able to look at what they do now through scientific technological eyes instead of eyes of mystery and wonder, and saying they've got to be gods. So we have also brought ourselves to a new point on the pathway where we can become different types of partners. But the biggest issue really is that not just knowledge has to get into the public, but valuable knowledge that also has some way of being, the scientific tenets of reliability, is it accurate and how do we know? Instead of the anecdotal stories by the original storytellers, or as I was alluding to before and got off track, the other way we get the information is the people who study these stories and the people who've had experiences, and they become the experts. And what I found on a personal level is when I used to speak around the world, people would put you up on a pedestal and you become like a hero. And that was one of the reasons I stepped back from doing that, because I want people to think. And I would always start my presentations with, I'm going to tell you what I know and what I learned and what I experienced, but you have to figure it out for yourself. Not just take the word of me. I know I'm telling the truth. You don't know I'm telling the truth. So, just take what I have to offer you and bring it in with everything else as you research and think and know and sense and intuit and make up your own mind. Because also if we reach a point where it does come out into the open, we're very susceptible to everybody trying to tell us what is the reality, whether it's comes from a government representative, somebody who says that they're, a voice, or it comes from even an extraterrestrial themselves. That's why this is what I call the age of emancipated thinking. And if we don't get a grip on that and step away from the conspiracy theories and religious influences and media celebrities that are all trying to tell us what to think, whether it's your family or your teachers or whatever, we aren't going to go where we really have the opportunity to go. Let me turn it to you.
No problem. So when I look back at my channel, I guess one subject is really predominant there, during the interviews, and that is drop the savior programming and start saving yourself. So, but I have to say, if you start investigating extraterrestrial life, it is very easy to be siphoned off by this, yeah, let's say superficial and it always has a very strong savior aspect. The Pleiadians are saying this,
Oh
the
God, yes.
Arcturians are saying this, and the Pleiadians will do that, and the Galactic Federation of Light, blah, 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 blah. And there you always have a very, very strong aspect of savior in it. And that is actually something, when I smell that, it has a hint of savior program, I step away from that. And up to now, it has served me well, I have to say.
Because it's been a very wise decision. Also, when you get a lot of these savior messages, this takes us into another aspect. Now, I've had two things. I've had face-to-face contact, but I've also experienced the channeling phenomenon, and a lot of information that comes in through channeling. How do you know that it's true, or where it's coming from? Are you being catfished? Are you being alien fished? Is it your higher consciousness? And so whenever I brought through the information that I had, well, one, it was often of a very different nature than what you would see in terms of, a lot of times it's about, from many sources where I read extraterrestrial information, it's about, how do I put this? Very simple science, nothing very sophisticated. It's something you could get anywhere or feel good about yourself and how to put yourself together and feel whole. The information that I got, even though I will say this is where I believe it came from, could have come from my higher consciousness or, any source out there. I will absolutely say I'm no expert, I don't know, but it had a deeper level. Now, some of it came across as spiritual pablum, some of the languaging. I mean, I was thinking, this is coming out of me. This isn't what I believe. But there are many aspects where it just kind of blew my mind, especially over the years as I look back at what was published and even the unpublished stuff in terms of details of what they said was going to happen, or I'd have to research up in science or technology and say, oh, this is right. So yeah, the savior complex, as you put, is one of the things that is going to be a very big one, particularly where people here on the planet at this time, are so vulnerable and so angry and so frustrated. I don't believe it will happen at this time. I don't think it will happen at least until the 30s at the earliest, is my guess at this point. Now, this also takes us down a pathway is, if I don't know if this is right, we'll never know. But there were 2 dates that they had given me where they had hoped that they would make breakthroughs where they could be acknowledged. I think I'd have to look it up. I think one was in 2004, another time around 2014, 16. And both of those, as we know, did not come to pass. But that also brings up, using their information wisely. Did you see me on the airways saying, we're going to have extraterrestrial contact, blah, 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 blah? Heck no. It's just something that, I took in for my knowledge and watched very carefully to see if it would happen, and it didn't. So yeah, so there's so much information out there, but what of it is really valuable and real is the hard part to figure out.
Yeah. And what do you think? Why is that? Why are we so easily swept away with any term? I mean, we have political saviors, we have religious saviors, we have the alien savior meme, we have, I don't know. Why is that we always love to have some type of savior? I mean, okay, here in the Western world, even if you grow up in a non-religious household, one way or another, it will come to you that the minute you are born, you are automatically a sinner. And then you have to do certain tasks in order to redeem yourself. You have to comply to a certain belief structure and doctrine or whatever.
But that's
And
religious ideology.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
the doctrine of religious ideology, which we have to step beyond. And what you're asking is because it's an easy pathway, is one, to do self-work and be disciplined, that's something that a lot of us don't want to do. And so, that's one. The other one I think has to do with the fact that we're mammalian species, and the mammalian species, most of them look for a leader of type. There's a leader and a follower. That's a big thing, behavioral aspect that happens with mammals. And so, we do that, we look for one strong voice and then follows. And that's where that overused expression of being a sheep or whatever. I think sheep are wonderful. Stop maligning them, first of all, as an
Yeah.
person. But that concept of the strong voice and then the rest follow. And I think that's part of our wired mammalian tendencies for the majority of us. And, I think you and I are going to talk about the spiritual demographics in a few minutes, which will get us past that. But generally, that's I think another driving force with that. So it's important for us to look at, as we find our answers as we're probing why about so many things, that we don't find one answer. It's not always one answer. A lot of times it comes from different levels. It can come from consciousness, from genetic programming, from dimensional frequencies. We have to realize something that is very important that I found a number of years ago. No matter how much you think you don't know. And then I learned this a lot from the extraterrestrial experiences, as you think, wow, I've got it, I know it. And then all of a sudden, there's another layer of information. There's a whole nother layer that comes later, and you get a totally different perspective. And this goes on and on and on. It's as if you walk into a building and you look out on the ground floor and you say, this is life. And then at some point you get to go up 3 stories and you go, oh, it looks kind of different from up here. And then eventually you go up another 4 stories and you say, whoa, it looks really different, and on ad infinitum. And so we have to realize that it doesn't stop, that we're always capable of learning. I'll have one that'll match you at some point. She'll be flying through here later, or you'll hear her screaming. So start a meme. It's really good luck when a cat shows you their tushy.
I know.
I'm blessed.
So those races, that was that only one group, different groups? Did they tell you where, who and what they are and where they come from, or how did that take place?
Okay, so what I learned through my experiences, there were many different groups, but what I've picked up, again, cautioning people is what I learned. There's 2 major types of experiences you could have. One are the extraterrestrials that all kinds of people have named. You went through them, Pleiadians, Arcturians, and whatever all the faff is. The other ones are what I termed, just not knowing what else to call them, are multidimensionals. Much more powerful, highly spiritual frequency, where the extraterrestrials are more like your space explorers. They're often embodied in a physical unit, a physical being. Some of them may have appendages like us, some may look very different, but it's an aware being in a physical unit. The multidimensionals are more what you'd think of as like an old master type, highly aware, the wisdom of the universe. To me, it's a rare and an occasion and a great honor, one of the very few times I've had to experience them. They also, the experiences have been wrapped up in a jocularity, a type of humor, but it's not a biting humor. It's a very loving, self-deprecating, pushing you a little bit type of humor. The other thing that's amazing to me is, while the physical beings bring an experience that it comes from, I believe, penetrating through the dimensions and feeling the dimensions change around you, causing a lot of the physical things that happen to us. There's none of that. There's a sense of great spiritual love and oneness and calm and peace. It's amazing. And so this is how I've taken my life and look at what is out there by dividing it into two categories: the multidimensionals, which seems to be an aware being that functions on many different frequencies and dimensions simultaneously at once, ancient wise beings, versus those who are in physical form and going through their own journeys, and some have civilizations, some I don't know what they have. So that's how I break it into those two main categories. I think that it's so easy to get caught up in what you were just pointing out in terms of the Pleiadians do this or told me this. I was taught at one time that the names really have no meanings, and that they're chosen for a couple of reasons. One, it's a something that may have meaning for us, maybe kind of biblical association or something that we would like, but really it's also the vibrational frequency that they respond to. And it's almost like hearing music, and every sound that they make creates a certain vibrational frequency. So they said, at least in that particular experience, that these names of Palladian or whatever are very comfortable, and they're in your culture, and you go ahead, use them. So but we tend to get caught up because we want defined answers all the time. We want, this is A, I want to know what it is. This is B, I want to know what it is and what to expect. And this is C. And, the extraterrestrial experience basically brings expanded thinking and widened perceptions. And so, when we go into those categories that we so conveniently want to use to look at information, especially something so new to us, it's not going to serve us that well. We need to think very, very differently. And that's another thing about the human, is we think very linearly, and we can't do that as we go forward into this new concept, because when you get off the planet, it's mind blowing. And what did the astronauts, I think the astronauts called it the overview effect, when you get off the planet and you're looking in, this is so disconcerting. There's no pole or to guide you. We think left, right, up, down. There isn't. And so what I learned in terms of my experiences, it's thinking in inner and outer. And you have to learn to use your consciousness to drive yourself to a certain point. You have to learn how to use your consciousness in a whole new way to get around, basically. So
if I understand this correctly, the extraterrestrials, they don't think of themselves as Arcturians, Pleiadians, this and that.
That's my impression. That may not be accurate. That's my impression. Even think about here on Earth, Germany, Alemania, there's different names for different countries, and there's also different ways of understanding regions and places. And this is another really important point when you're having the experiences, how I would represent myself and where I'm from may be very different from the reality of it. And I may just show you or expose you to certain things I want you to see that make me look pretty good,
Yeah.
And so, you think about it that way. If you were a visitor coming to see me, I will take you to, the highlights. I'm not going to take you to the worst places where, there's outrageous crime and people are suffering. I'm gonna, probably show off the best that there is to show. Is this any different? So when they come and they tell us about who they are or what they have, you've got to realize again, there's that limiting window. You don't know what you don't know, and you're only being given information, but so many of a certain limiting type. But people who have experiences will often, it's so overwhelming, they just grab it and embrace it and run with it. So
yeah, I never had any contact. And but personally, I have to say I'm very, very cautious. I'm not somebody who would jump on that train. Oh, yes, the alien species that is finally showing us the world.
they said something, we're at 2022, probably about 10 years ago at this point. They said that they were working with a lot of the human species in the dream state at that point in time. I think it was 2006, 2007. And they said that the percentage of the population, they said that they were contacting through the dream state, just blew me away. It was phenomenal. It was very high. So that's another thing, that's our unknown region too, that netherworld of what's on there.
And I think that is something where sometimes you can feel that you wake up, that you have a very, very clear memory of what went on in that dream, but it also feels as if that's not my dream. That came from somewhere else, as
I feel like it was being programmed.
Somebody was broadcasting. Let's put it that way.
I know what you're talking about. I do know what you're talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Then I guess I understand what you mean.
But when they said that, whether they were doing that or referring to the experience that you and I are talking about, I don't know. Or they were just having encounters, getting people used to that, seeing them in an, when we're in our altered state of reality, in the dream state, or we're teaching and sharing information. I don't know. They just had shared that there was a movement on at that point to introduce them to us through that method. And as I think about it, in a way, since we don't know as much about consciousness as we really like to think we do, it may be a very smart thing, because especially if a being looks different, you can see it on a movie screen, and the way they're portrayed. But when you see it in reality, it is jarring. I mean, I've had this since I was in the crib, and every single time it happens, my psyche, my basic ego psyche goes, and so to introduce themselves in a way where in an altered state of consciousness may take off some of the shock of them looking a bit different.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah, I can imagine that some people will be overwhelmed by such an experience, and especially if impressing technology goes along with it.
Well, there's also the ability that is going to have the potential to scare a lot of people, which will give the opportunity for others to take control and say what you should believe and do. And what I'm getting at is that humans have always regarded themselves as the dominant species. We are the king of the kingdom. There's nobody more developed than us that we know of. We rule the earth. And all of a sudden, there's another intelligent life form that has abilities that the average human doesn't. They have the ability to camouflage themselves, to affect you mentally and what you're thinking, the ability to create a hallucination or things that will just blow people's minds and scare them, not only personally, but as a species. Just look at how people are behaving now, nation against nation, neighbor against neighbor, ideology against ideology. And then you have a whole new twitch thrown into the paradigm, and it's going to be hard. So I suspect that is why there hasn't been the rapid movement forward to acknowledge this, because we are at a very dangerous state. Plus, we're the smelly, stinky cousin getting off the couch and going into space. That's gonna scare the pants off now. And especially, who's going into space is, it's not our how do I choose my words? It's not necessarily our noblest representations of mankind, but it's maybe some of our more ambitious representations of mankind who are stepping out and using the money for the technology to move out there. And of course, this is going to be very familiar to you, is there's also moving out into space with a vehicle and then without a vehicle. And that's the other thing too, is, I've been exposed to a number of those types of situations. So,
yeah, I don't even believe that we really rule here on Earth. I have the impression that, I could not tell you who, but I have the impression that there are alien races who are running this place as their personal enterprise.
I've heard that before. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I'm not gonna, pretend to be an authority on something. I've heard that's a perspective. I think the issue is, it has multiple layers, is that there are definitely those beings on the planet who, are able to manipulate and control, financial paradigms and movements and, economic flow. They could be very well humans, with their own agenda, or, because we are not exposed to the idea of extraterrestrials and their history on this planet, other than what's been pulsed into the common culture. I can't say it's not happening. I tend to think it's probably human with extraterrestrial knowledge and awareness that they use to their benefit, but that's just a random wild-eyed guess. I don't know.
Yeah, I think there is a human component to that. Yes, of course. I think there are various factions that might even work with different species. I don't know. And yeah, but I just recently, in fact, this morning, I read an article about, yeah, I forgot the word. The title. It will come back to me when I'm not thinking about it. But it was basically about making business of with DNA and cataloging it and making it.
Yeah. The whole trademarking, copywriting, owning genetic sequences, that started a number of years ago. And I thought, oh, this is so not good. This keeps humanity under the very strong thumb of the current structure it has. The goal is to see if humanity can emancipate and create an advanced civilization. And an advanced civilization is characterized by opportunity for every citizen who chooses to take of it to be the best version of themselves. So there's equal opportunity there. It's characterized by peaceful ways of living, and cooperative ventures, and working with the planet that you live on, as a responsible steward, and taking care of the planet. There's elements to it. And so, there's also responsibilities as a citizen, to keep that going and to participate in that. So, when you have this situation of owning the sequences, I'm almost speechless at it, but it again, it's like the worst of mankind. that is out there, you know, trying to
Mhm.
own and control instead of just, okay, here it is for the common good. Let's just use it. We know it, we research it, and we see what we can come up with.
Mhm.
So, you know, these are the things we need to move past. And that's what, you know, Spirconomics was kind of birthed, is to try to see if the fate of mankind can be put in the hands of people who have the best interests of mankind and take it out of the economic paradigm that rules this planet right now, which is material driven, and material driven leads to greed drivers within yourself. You know, it doesn't lead to the best. So by putting more of a, call it a spiritual focus on creating a whole different type of economic platform on the planet, you can get rid of that focus and get people to move towards more altruistic, beneficial types of things and really meet their true responsibility and have a great quality life.
Mhm.
So, you know, it sounds, you know, utopian babble, but it's actually possible. Now, whether it's possible within 2 or 3 generations or 2 or 3 centuries, that's up to mankind.
Yeah,
That's the situation.
yeah, exactly. So in your book, Spirconomics, which is a combination of
Fun.
spirituality and economics, you talk about three types of human beings: the evolved human being, the evolving human being, the elementary, and the enlightened, the luminaries, the
Well,
enlightened human. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
so one of the platforms of Spirconomics is, if you're going to make a better world, it's important to understand who you are and the world around you. And part of who we are does involve the invisible sphere of the intelligence that's within us. So I refer to it as the soul. You know, soul has a lot of religious types of connotations, but particularly from what I learned from the extraterrestrial experiences, is that there is an actual science of the soul and how that energy comes in and inhabits a biological unit and creates a unit of one instead of symbiotic. There's symbiotic components that create a unit of one. And so what I learned is that when we're going to look at this through somewhat metaphysical eyes now, is that, you know, if you look at those beings that migrate to the earth plane to come in and have a life and have a physical experience, that at this point in time, there's 3 different levels of understanding that come in and work on the earth plane. Now, this is different because in centuries past, way long ago, it used to be just 2. And it used to be those who were very small minority, but were on the path of higher self-awareness and enlightenment and focused on the greater good. And then the general populace, who was very driven in the demands and the needs of everyday life and fighting for what they felt they needed and they wanted, very physically driven. Now there's 3 platforms. So what you were referring to are the enlightened luminaries, which I call in the spiritual demographics terminology SD1s. You know, these are the people who are on the path of higher awareness. They self-reflect. They look at the deeper meaning behind everything. They don't focus on themselves. They focus on the collaborative unit of all. And what we could call a metaphysical, the mystic pathway is very common to them because they're always looking outside themselves in their relationship to the greater reality. The second group that is now on the planet is, I affectionately call, the spiritual middle class, and that's the emerging human. And that's the majority of people in developed countries, because you're so busy just trying to get through the day that while you have urges to know more, you don't have the time to fulfill them. So you're curious about a lot of the things that the enlightened luminary pathway brings. You're curious about the afterlife, you know, what's really out there, extraterrestrial reality, the paranormal skill set, all these types of things, but you just don't have time. You got to get the kids off to school. You've got to pay rent or mortgage. You've got to get that report off to a boss or something. You've got to put food on the table. It's just, who has time to get through the day, let alone think about nourishing my higher thoughts? And then the third group is what's referred to as elementary man, ST3. These are people who have a very fundamental mindset. And in the fundamental mindset, it's very rigid. And it means you have to believe what I believe. And if you don't believe what I believe, I have to kill you or make you go away. But there's a reason for that. If they are forced in their rigid thinking to think beyond what they know, they will have to question what they know, and their belief system won't survive. So there can be no questioning or threats to that core of a very fundamental belief system that's usually behaviorally driven. So this group is very rigid. So we've got the people who are exploring higher knowledge, we've got the people who are getting through the day, and then we've got the people who very fundamental, rigid, don't question what I know. And they're usually ideologically, religiously driven. With these three groups, they behave differently. They respond to different drivers and motivators, and they have different goals while they're here. Excuse me. And so if you know and understand these groups, you can relate to them in a way that opens up doorways, and it has several factors. It's got the the spiritual factor, and in terms of how do you want to communicate and build relationships with people and collaborate and go forward. But it also has the factor that's deeply driven in the business world, because you're going to speak to them differently, you're going to position differently, you're going to use different differentiation factors to identify yourself. You're going to use different core values. So it also impacts how you're going to make your way as a person who's trying to bring forth a better tomorrow, and the methods in which you're going to do it. So, hello, kitty. So the spiritual demographics really gives you a deep understanding into the motivations and machinations of why people do what they do. And it's a very effective tool to looking at the bigger picture of what's going on the planet, and then moving forward too. And so people who have used it have really found it can be lightning fast in terms of getting them to achieve their goals and get their message across and position professionally as they're moving into new industries, new professions, new ways of doing things.
So that was, I was muted because my cat, I have two cats, and he was making a lot of noise. So I muted myself.
Listen, I get it. I get it.
Yeah. And yeah, so we are nearing the top of the hour, and so this will conclude our first and public hour, and we will dive deeper into these subjects on the other side for the patrons. And Marcia, please let people know where to find you.
Online, beyondzebra.com. And that's all. Basically, that's it. I keep a low profile.
That's sometimes a good idea.
So, so if you go to beyondzebra.com, you can take a look around, see what's there, and decide whether you want to go forward, explore more, and contact me. The books, Spirconomics is available on Amazon, and it's a very fast read because it's just designed as the platform to the learning program. Confessions of an Intergalactic Anthropologist, which has a lot of what we were talking about. I don't know if you can see it with glare.
Yeah, now I can.
So that is an old book. It's was written quite a while ago. It needs to be updated. I took it off the market. There's about 500 copies left, I think, is all from the last printing that I basically let clients have and stuff. Very hard to find, but if you can find it, get it. A lot of people during the pandemic were clamoring for it, and not only was it not available, but there was no way I was going out to ship it to them. So I just kind of said, not available right now. So there's about 500 in print. You can sometimes find a used copy online. I'm hoping, I am so busy, but I am hoping that I can at least get some kind of updated version online in the coming year in terms of an ebook for people to have, because there's so much valuable information that will help you make up your own mind. You know, again, it's about emancipated thinking. And if I can help you on that journey, I'm honored.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. So that is the end of the public hour. And in the next hour, we will dive into how we are going to do this, build a better world. So we will see you on the other side.